Hello everybody and welcome back to the Tinker Box. Sadly, I've had to turn my Minecraft volume off since as soon as I started to try to record this, a thunderstorm started. Isn't that just my luck? But we're back here today for more Redstone lessons. Today's Redstone lesson is another logic gate. And if you remember from the first one, a logic gate, like a NOT gate, logically handles the output. Like a NOT gate just says NOT. It just inverses the input, if you remember from our last lesson. Now, this time we're looking at the logical AND gate. And the AND gate means if both things are powered, the logic gate sends out power. The best way to show you is by example. So here's one version of the AND gate I've built. And as you can see here, when I flip one switch on, nothing happens to the piston. When I flip the other switch on, nothing happens to the piston. But when I flip this switch and this switch on at the same time, the piston goes off. If I flip this switch back off again, the piston goes down, on it goes on, and if they're both off, it's down. So that is what the AND gate does. And it can be really helpful in certain situations, but before we get into practical uses for the AND gate, I should go over how one builds an AND gate. So you can see here, this is my favorite version of the AND gate, and the one I use the most often, just because it's the first AND gate I ever learned how to build way back in the days before repeaters even existed. So what you do is you have 3 blocks, like so, torch, redstone in between, and another redstone torch on the other side. So, how this works is, if you remember from the previous video, when you send a signal into a torch, it flips it off. And you also have to know that redstone defaults to on, which means that if 2 different signals are being received, on and off, by default the redstone will stay on. So that means when I toggle this redstone torch off, like so, this redstone still stays on, thus turning this redstone torch off because this one is still on. Now when both of these redstone torches are off, the redstone dust goes off, thus letting this redstone torch be on because this redstone dust is no longer powering this torch, which then sends its signal on its merry way over to the piston. Okay, now this is a horizontal version of it, which, you know, is what it says. It's lying on the ground like so. Now here's a horizontal version of the piston. Now this one is much simpler to explain. Basically, when I turn this repeater on, it has nothing to send the signal through, therefore nothing gets powered. When I turn this piston on, though, a signal isn't being sent through the block, it just moved a piston, therefore nothing's being powered. So if I turn the piston and send power through the block, it sends power through. This is probably a simpler version to understand and build, but the problem is it makes piston noise, which can get really obnoxious. So to build this, you just need a piston, a block, a sticky piston, rather, a block, 2 repeaters, and then you just put the repeater here where the block will be when it's pushed out, and so that way, when the piston pushes it out, the repeater will send the signal through the block and to the output source. Now we'll check out some vertical versions of the gates. This one is the vertical non-piston version. These pistons on the end here just to show the outputs working. This works a lot. This basically works in the same way that this guy over here does, except it's vertical. So as you can see, this turns this torch off, sends the signal through. Same with this one, turns the torch off, sending the signal through here, letting it come on. So works the same way as this, except it's vertical. So the way you build this is block, torch, and then you go 1, 2 blocks up, another torch, and then out from this torch on the bottom, you put a piece of redstone, on top of that piece of redstone, you put a piece of wool, and on top of that piece of wool, you put a piece of redstone. And in front of this piece of redstone, you put a block of wool, put a piece of redstone on top of that, and on the side of the block of wool, you put a torch. So again, the non-piston ones tend to sound more complicated, but it's easier done than said. And here's a vertical piston one, which looks just like that piston one over here. Nothing to send the signal through. And when you put the piston down, then it gives it something to send the signal through. So that's just piston pointing down with a wool block attached to it because it's a sticky piston, and then a repeater here just like on the horizontal one. Okay, now for practical application. We're going to make a door that you can open and close from different sides. Now, I'm sure for most of you, your first experience with redstone was probably an iron door. You slapped on an iron door and 2 switches, and you were like, turn it on, walk inside, and close the door. Oh, wait, it's not closing! Ah, gosh, dang it, why can't I close the door? Well, it's because of that little thing we talked about over here. Redstone defaults to the on position, which again means if at one input to redstone output is on, it does not matter what the heck you do with the other input, the output is going to stay in the on, or in this case, open position. So how do we fix that? Well, we're going to use an AND gate. How convenient that we're using today's lesson to do today's little project. I mean, who would have ever thought of that? So, this came in from a day of mining. You open your door, you get inside, you snuggle down, and you close it again. You sleep a little bit. After feeling well rested, you're ready to go back out and face the day. Yay, the magic of AND gates. Now this works really well if you only have one door to your house. However, there's a flaw with it. If you have 2 doors, and you go around here, and you flip that one on, you're going to notice your door hasn't opened. And that is because that's not how AND gates work. If it's one entrance, it works really well because you can set it up to be closed. You walk in, it's open. Oh, derp. And then you close it again. So really, you're just flipping one of them on and off because you're going in and out. But the issue is if you have a second entrance and you come around and then let's say you have them both off now, it becomes a problem because they both have to be on for it to work, not one on and one off, or they can both be off. It's just both of them on. So that means you have to be really careful about how you open and close the door, and that's fixable with something called the XOR gate, but we will get into that in the next lesson. For now, I'm going to show you how this little guy works, and just remember this is for one door entrances. I'd hate to accidentally lock you out of your survival house, although, you know, you could just dig your way back in. So, we'll start from the end, and at the end is an AND gate, and you might be thinking, oh, wait, you didn't show me how to build that. That does not look like what you showed me. Well, actually, it's just this. And the only difference is, instead of the redstone torch being attached directly to the end here, I plopped it over here and extended the signal to it so it would be easier to reach. And that's another thing to take away from today's lesson. Redstone is not set in stone. And when I say that, I mean you're always going to have a basic idea of logic gates or the way to build something, but never be afraid to tweak with redstone, like so. Move things around a little bit and make it fit into your workspace environment. That's one of the biggest things about playing with redstone, is learning how to adapt with it. Okay, so from this AND gate, there are repeaters on either side pushing in the signal, and those repeaters get their signal from it's the NOT gate that from our first lesson. So, when this switch gets thrown, it's going to power this redstone, which is going to toggle this torch, and that torch's signal is going to be passed on to this redstone, and this redstone is going to pass it on to the repeater, which is going to shove it in the AND gate. And so thus, if you have these both off, or in the upright position, I mean, it's going to be open. And you might be thinking, Andrew, you told me they both had to be on for the AND gate to work. Well, you have to remember that we threw in a NOT gate, which means this in the up position technically means it's on. And I know being told how redstone works sounds really confusing, especially for this small little thing, but redstone's one of those easier things that's easier done than said. So as you work with it, my confusing explanations will become clearer and clearer. But for now, I just recommend you build it, play with it, and try to compact it. Because keep in mind, when I'm building these things for you, I'm building them to show you. I'm not building them to make them compact and agile. So, I think that's going to be today's homework. Try to take this AND gate door design and make it fit into a smaller space. Just see if you can do it. Because I'm absolutely sure that this can fit in a smaller space. And if you can't make it fit in a smaller space, that's okay. We're just starting out here. I'm not expecting you to make me, computers right off the bat. Just play with the redstone is basically what I want you to do. Because as good as watching videos are, you're never going to get better at this skill if you don't practice it. So, that's all for this redstone lab this week. This is the Koala and the Scoot saying, Toodles!